Welcome to the System Simplified podcast, where we feature top leaders who share stories on how to successfully systemize a business. Now, let's get started with the show.
Hello, Adi Klevit here with the System Simplified podcast, where we interview top entrepreneurs, founders, and thought leaders about systematizing a business. And this podcast is being brought to you by Business Success Consulting Group. At Business Success Consulting Group, we create custom processes and tailor-made business systems so businesses can thrive and grow. All right, and today's guest is Camela Thompson. Hi, Camela.
Hi, thanks so much for having me.
You are very welcome. Well, I'm very excited to have our conversation today because we're going to talk, of course, all about systems and processes, because that's what this podcast is about. But we're going to talk about systems and processes and how it applies to creative people and visionaries and people that think they might not need processes and procedures. So it's going to be a very interesting and fun conversation.
I'm looking forward to it.
Yes, but before we jump into it, let me introduce you. So, Camela, you are the VP of Marketing at CaliberMind, which is a leading B2B platform for revenue insights you can trust. And we're going to talk more about that and what it means. You are based in Seattle. The company is based in Colorado, but you are based in Seattle. And you spent over 15 years in revenue operations in the tech industry, in successful startups. And so you have a lot of experience in terms of growing companies, the importance of operations, but you also in the marketing area. So we're going to talk about that combination and why it is important and why it actually makes you successful, because you have that combination of both worlds. So tell us a little bit more about CaliberMind.
So we're a marketing analytics platform. We solve for attribution, buyer journey tracking, engagement or surge scoring. But the reason why we're so powerful is we hook up to all the source systems and clean that data and put it on a unified timeline before analyzing it. And I think a lot of folks don't realize the reason why people don't trust their numbers and are very skeptical is because their data is a mess. So we address that part first.
That's very important for sure, because you can make incorrect decisions if you don't have the right data.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So the target market who you work with are actually B2B agencies, marketing agencies, because you help them make decisions, right?
And we actually, our largest client set are B2B tech businesses, but specifically the marketing departments. We also work with agencies, so yes.
Great. So it's the marketing area of companies that serve B2B. There are B2B, basically serve business clients.
Yes.
Great. So why processes are important?
Oh, well, I can tell you a horror story or two to get us started, just to illustrate it. I'm a marketer at heart and a storyteller, so I have to start with a story. So we were starting up our podcast. I was so excited, landed a big guest, met with him, and immediately lost him because I didn't have a process in place. So I think whenever I coach small businesses, entrepreneurs, I really want to emphasize to them that the creative part's important, but if you don't have a system in place, particularly for follow-up, for securing clients, for responding to those contact us requests, you're in a lot of trouble.
For sure. So what happened to that guest? You never got him back?
Never got him back, but I haven't lost a guest since because I immediately learned I needed to have a more organized approach. So developed an agenda, developed a process, developed several steps that happened afterwards. And then I put them in a nice document so they understand what to expect and what's coming next. And so far, so good.
That's really good.
Yeah.
So what would you say to somebody who is a creative, an entrepreneur that is more on the visionary side? They go, systems are not for me. Having an agenda for my podcast will actually ruin my creativity, as an example, right? So it's like, I hear it a lot. I'm sure you do too, in terms of like, you have processes and you have creativity, and how do they actually, some people think that they might not work together. I think they do. What is your answer to that?
I think people need to be very self-aware and recognize the areas that aren't their strong points and figure out a way to shore them up. So my podcast is very discussion based. We don't script it. And as yours is the same way, but we have a topic discussion ahead of time and put some bullet points down so we can keep it reined in. So no one wants to listen to a 3-hour podcast that rambles all over the place. We need a little bit of organization to rein it in.
That's for sure.
And where that even applies more may not be to the episode, but how are you securing the guests? How are you keeping track of everybody you're recording with? How are you letting them know the process and what they can expect? Because people are very uncomfortable with the unknown. And you can think of process as reassuring people and keeping them hooked.
That's a very good point here in terms of like why processes, because I always like to ask my guests, my clients, prospective clients, like, why do you need processes and procedures? Why do you need to systematize? And there are obviously common answers, but I find that each business will have their own why. You can have several businesses that will say consistency. There will be several that will say because we want to onboard. There will be several that will say risk mitigation, right? But it is definitely that one in terms of not having to deal with the unknown is very important because, and it's also important in onboarding and training new employees because they come into your organization and they don't know what to expect. But the same applies to your customers, right?
Right. I always think of it as minimizing loss and maximizing profit. So we're trying to find the holes in the process and where people find tension, and we're removing the tension.
That's right. So it's basically how to minimize loss and increase profits by systematizing your business. That's really the question that business owners should ask themselves and then figure out what processes they need to document and they need to create.
Exactly.
So we touched on follow-up, the follow-up process. Let's talk about that. Let's see if we can figure out what is the optimum follow-up process for any business. What would be the first thing, or what do you see? Let's start with the errors so we can go into the positive. What do you see are the main errors that businesses or business owners or entrepreneurs, executives make in terms of follow-up?
Right. So we have to keep in mind that 80 to 90% of the buying process is research online. So you don't even see what people are doing before they interact with you, and they already know about you ideally. So having the right website is so critical, and the right message. Once they're motivated enough to engage with a chatbot or a contact us form, I have seen a lot of businesses not have a process in place to follow up with those people. And that is like burning money in the parking lot because those people are motivated. They know about you. They understand what you do, and they want to talk to you. You need a process in place to make sure that information is being elevated immediately to someone who can eloquently respond. In this day and age, people want to research what they want to research, and they want an immediate response when they want to talk to somebody about what they want to purchase. And that's just the world we live in and the reality we live in, and we need to prepare for it.
Right. So what would be some good ideas so that's we talked about, we kind of like started a process. We're talking about what not and what yes, but yeah, I definitely have a website, have a good website that answers the questions. I interviewed for my podcast, I interviewed Marcus Sheridan, and he did a fantastic job explaining, like, they ask, you answer, right? So that was definitely a great book that explains the why you need to actually create the answers right there on your website. So when people look at your website, they will actually get the answers.
So then the next step is give them a way to easily contact you. And for a lot of people, that's a contact us form if they don't have somebody to man a chatbot. Although a lot of chatbots, they have mobile apps that can go directly to your phone. So when you're thinking about how to follow up with somebody, make sure your website is set up so a contact us request immediately goes to somebody who is available to follow up.
Mhm.
Make sure you're asking the right questions so they can you can contact them. Make sure the email field's on there, the phone number's on there. And these seem like really simple things, but I've seen them missed. So you need to have a how you contact them. You have to have a who to follow up. And then you need some kind of process in place so they understand where the person's coming from on the website. So this is the person following up. Don't assume common sense ever. Make sure they know what the person asked or what the person was trying to do. Is it a demo request? Are they wanting a quote? What exactly are they wanting to do? So the person who's following up can do so appropriately.
Absolutely. Good. So you have that, you have a way for them. It has to be easy. It has to, like, the communication line has to be open. It's very easy. It has to be easy for them to communicate. I agree. And then when you actually get it, you have to assign, it has to get to the right person that can answer right away. It doesn't have to be the business owner. It has,
Right.
I mean, it will be somebody in the organization. Good. So that's the next step. Then what?
So once you've followed up and you've determined their interests, so the first call is usually a discovery call if you're selling. So you want to understand their timeline, whether they have a budget or a project that makes this urgent. You want to understand what their needs are. And that's not, I need your product. It's, I need more time to spend with my kids, or I need to have this thing so I have more job security. So get down to the emotional need that they're trying, because if you can tie your follow-up to that, it's much more meaningful than just, yeah, you were interested about my product, here's more information. No.
So make your response meaningful, right? Really trying
Yes.
to understand why they are contacting you.
Mhm.
Now, sometimes that line is very tenuous, right? Because let's say I was in the middle of, I was late at night researching something. I sent a chat. The business did not see it until the morning because we don't expect everybody to have it 24/7. Maybe they do. But
Mhm.
I sent a message, or I went to the website and contact us. And then, I get an email back, or I get a phone call if I left my phone number.
Mhm.
But then I forgot about it, right? I mean, what I was researching, I mean, that happens because you're researching, or I get busy, or I go, okay, I will answer later. What are some things that you have seen that make that process easier, or gets the engagement, continues the engagement?
So what I always recommend is if you're responding later, that is a perfect excuse to do a little research first and, go to their LinkedIn profile, see what business they're with, maybe get a little information, and then remind them what they were doing when they reached out to you. So, hey, last night around this time, you sent us a message. We do this. Is there anything I can help with? So make sure to remind them where you found them and that it's not just this random spam call, because people get those all the time.
We do. I'm
Mhm.
sure you do. I do. And, it definitely happens. So it's basically make it personal, talk to the person in front of you, basically. It's like find out who they are and do some research. And would you recommend saying something to the effect? I mean, let's say you do research on that company and you see that you work with similar companies, maybe letting them know that, you have helped similar companies.
Absolutely. And maybe bring up a struggle they had initially and see if that's familiar to them and they feel the same way. So, what I want to point out is this is a process we're talking about, but there's still creativity in each of the steps.
Mhm.
So, this involves a lot of creativity in figuring out, okay, what did my customer really struggle with when they came to us? And when you put, like, we saw this issue, is this familiar? Hopefully that strikes a chord immediately and it draws them in a little bit more.
Absolutely. And I think it's also, you ask questions as opposed to assuming, right? I mean, you have to, as you said, you have to be creative. So some of the ways is, I saw that you were, you sent us this message at this and that time. This is what we do. Would that be of interest to you? Or you were researching what is it that draw you to us, right? Or if you have analytics and you can see what is it on the website that we're looking at, right? Or you just have to be creative in terms of engaging the conversation.
Yes, but going back to process, you need a way to track who came in, whether or not they were followed up with, and what next steps are. Because ideally, it's not just that one conversation, right? You're still moving them along the buyer journey. So have some structure in place to remind the person who had that initial conversation about your business and keep them moving forward.
So you mean like a drip campaign to those people?
It could be a reminder to go to their LinkedIn and comment on something they've done. It could be a reminder to reach out to them, or it could be a reminder that you have a meeting. So it could look like a lot of different things. The important thing is that you are closing the loop or moving it forward.
I see. I thought you meant in terms of the follow-up. So let's say you send one email and then let's say you don't get a response, you put them on some kind of a drip campaign, but that could be.
Yeah. I wouldn't recommend that right away. So if they're filling out a contact us, they're engaging on your chat, they're probably fairly motivated, and you need to find the right way to remind them why they did that in the first place.
Right.
And that might take more than one try. I'm not saying you spam them, but you may have to try a few times before you put them in a drip campaign.
Okay, good. So that's part of the process. You try several times and then you can put them in the drip campaign. I think a good way to do it too is to be creative on how you reach them. So if you tried an email twice and you didn't get a response, you might want to call. If it's a cell phone, you can text. I mean, they gave you the cell phone. You can find them on social media and maybe contact them through LinkedIn.
Right. That's what I coach our salespeople to do, actually, is they start with email. That doesn't work. Reach out on LinkedIn and say, hey, I might be getting caught in the spam filter and I just want to check. And here's why I know about you. Here's what you did. And here's maybe a problem you may be facing. So try different methods and say, my email might get lost, or I know you get a lot of messages on social, and then try the other way.
Yeah, or find something on social media. Let's say you look on LinkedIn and there is some event that happened. I mean, you can comment on that, like make it more personal, because I know that I tend to respond to messages that are actually more personal. But honestly, I can tell you that people will say something like, well, I listened to your podcast and it was great. And I go like, well, I mean, it's kind of like, well, did you
whatever.
listen? But if somebody said, I listened to your episode with Camela, and the process that you develop on the how to follow up was great and I actually implemented it, well, I will definitely respond because there is more personal interaction. Now, what do you think about, but it takes time to do that, right? I mean, you have to have the time and the ability to do that. So how do you evaluate the importance of which leads should I actually invest the time doing it? How much should I invest in that follow-up, and when should I just make it more generic?
I love that question. And I think it all has to do with the level of intent they're displaying with the action they're taking and whether or not they're in your ideal customer profile. So those two things will determine the urgency. So if they fill out a contact us, they're on chat, that's a fairly motivated person. I would immediately research them. Are they in my target market? If I'm live with them now, I don't even bother doing that. If they want a demo, they get a demo, right? If they download a piece of content and it's gated, if, there's a lot of other actions people can take, those probably go straight to a drip campaign. I'm not going to spend as much time on them unless they are perfectly suited to what we do.
That's a good point. So it's really when you have your marketing process on the follow-up on leads, so it's really you have to understand how they came to the funnel, really understand if they are warm, cold, or hot, right? The leads, you have to separate them into like what degree of interest, I would say, they had.
Right.
and then research them in terms of who they are and do they actually fit your customer or your client profile. Now,
Right.
Camela, if it's a smaller, if you have a higher ticket sale and less clients like an agency will have, it's easier to do that than if you are a B2C that has multiple leads, right? So, but in that case, if somebody is actually reaching out, you should have some kind of a process or a mechanism to be able to follow up more than if somebody just downloaded a piece of literature or anything like that. So
absolutely. And there are a lot of chat bots where you can actually put conversations, preloaded conversations in place and hook it up to a knowledge base or some kind of area that answers frequently asked questions. So if you have a set of questions you're seeing consistently, you can set up your chatbot to just pop that up, or you can redirect people to your FAQ page. There are a lot of things you can do that don't involve a human through the process up front to take care of some of the noise. And then you're just getting the people who are specifically asking a certain trigger that tells you, yes, they're very motivated and they want to buy, and I need to talk to them right now.
Absolutely. So how many times is enough? How many times do you suggest following up on a warm lead of somebody that actually had interest and showed some kind of an interest that they want to know more about your company?
Yeah, so it's tough because there's stats out there saying it takes 11 times to blah, blah, blah. And it depends. It depends. So how big a ticket item is this? Are they squarely in your customer profile? How motivated are you? So if you're a B2C company with a really high volume, maybe once is enough for you. If you're a company and you've been after this client for ages, follow up with them as many times as you think is reasonable and not going to anger them. So that's a fine line. And I don't envy the person deciding that little balancing act, but I guess the consultant in me always says it depends. And it's so true in this case.
Absolutely. It does depend. You have to use judgment. And that's part of the process where it's not black and white. Right. You don't just go and you do because it says on a piece of paper or on your computer that now you have to follow up 11 times. That's where you have to use judgment. And you also, I think if you research the person, let's say on LinkedIn, you can see how engaged they are. I mean, if they are engaged, if they have a lot of followers, if they have a lot of connections, then they understand the game of communication and they like communication, right? If you have somebody who is not active, who hasn't posted, who doesn't have a lot of connections, that's probably somebody who is more guarded or does not really play the game of the networking and the connections. So you can learn a lot by actually looking at that and seeing their behavior and then act accordingly.
Absolutely. That's a great advice.
Yeah. So that is the follow-up. And of course, you have to keep good records and you have to have a CRM that really works in terms of, and not just have a good CRM, because there are definitely very good CRMs out there, but it's a matter of putting the data in the CRM, right? That should be part of your process, is updating the CRM and updating the next stage, and basically tagging it correctly, figuring out what is the stage you are at and what is the next move. So even if you're not there, somebody else can step in and take it from there.
Yes, absolutely. And what I always recommend here is if you can afford it, or you can find something that's integrated with the CRM, so you don't have to manually make those updates, much better. So passive logging is what I call it. So have a connector to your email and your calendar. Make sure that things are automatically flowing in. You don't have to think about it. So the only really big updates are when there's an opportunity and you're moving stages along. Otherwise, all of that information is flowing in without some human needing to make the decision to log it.
Right. And most CRMs have the ability to connect to your email, etc. Well, what about if you make a phone call, and do you then need to, I guess you could make notes, or you can have artificial intelligence that can record a call, like, and transcribe the call, and then it can go into your CRM as well. So it's a matter of judgment and seeing how long it takes and is it important. But it is the main thing is to have a method of tracking what you're doing and what the next step is.
Absolutely. You don't want to lose a prospective client. This is the whole point.
Right. That's exactly right. And I think it's also, the question of like how many times is enough in terms of following up. Sometimes when people don't follow up, you feel like they don't care. I mean, it happened to me. I reached out to somebody, had a conversation. I wasn't ready to make a decision. I needed more data. I needed time to look at it or make some things had to get into place before I'm ready. But I never heard back. And I thought, oh, I'm probably just, a small fish that I'm not that important for them. So that's why they're not calling me, right? I mean, that can cross our minds if we don't get the attention and the interest from the other party.
Yeah, we're humans. We don't separate emotion from what's happening very well, and we can make our own interpretations. That's why it's so critical to have a process and follow up as soon as possible.
That's right. And I also like to tell potential clients, what is my process? Share it with them, right? I mean, obviously, if somebody reaches, even if somebody reaches from the internet, I mean, that can be part of the thing that in the follow-up email, look, you're going to get, I'm reaching out, let's say the first one, they don't answer. I mean, if appropriate, you can say, I'm going to reach out this or that, I'm going to do this. If you don't want to, then let me know. Sometimes you get a response, no, I don't want to, right? But you can let them know, because again, it's what you mentioned at the beginning of the podcast. It's the unknown. If you know my process, you probably will be more likely to engage and to be part of it.
Yeah, and I really like that suggestion because, like you said, it gives them the ability to say, yes, I want to continue, or no, I don't. And they feel involved and they feel like you care about what they think. And that goes back to what you were saying about when you weren't followed up with. I mean, it's just really important to give people options when you can, but also just make sure they know you care.
That's right. That's right. And it's closed options. It's within your process, but it also gets the involvement because I want to ask those questions. So you want to put something out there that will elicit a response, so you need to know how to elicit those responses. But again, it comes back to what you were mentioning at the beginning, is do some research, figure out who they are, talk to the person in front of you. And, in marketing, let's say if it's impossible for you to research every single lead that you can, then you do a research on the leads or your best clients, best customers, the best leads that you've gotten, and you see the common denominator. So then when you respond to that common denominator, which might not apply to everyone, but it will get a response from those that you want, because you want that common denominator. Like if your clientele, if your best ideal client will be, let's say, a company with 5 million and 100 plus employees, as an example, 5 million and up and 100 plus employees and up, then you research what elicits responses from business owners that have those types of companies. And then you can always communicate as if though that person is that avatar. And if they're not, then they're not going to respond, which is fine because it already eliminates those that are not your ideal client.
Right. I mean, we go through that process too. At CaliberMind, we have an ideal customer profile, and then we also have a call to see if this is a good fit for everyone involved. Because if you haven't prioritized data, you don't have somebody who can interpret the data into next steps and actions, it's probably not a good fit. And that's okay. I've never heard a company say, I regret going too narrow. I always hear, I regret going too wide, because we weren't able to develop effective communication that worked with all of those different audiences.
That's for sure. Absolutely. So do you have specific questions that you ask on your discovery call? Is that part of your process?
Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely. Particularly around what's motivating them, what pains they're feeling, why this is so important. And if there's a timeline, why now? What's your problem? Keep asking the what's, and then why now? Those are so critical. But we're also asking questions like, who do you sell to? Are you B2B or B2C? If you're B2C, it's not a fit.
Right. So after you do the follow-up and then you have the actual discovery call, it's very important to ask those questions. And I ask similar questions. I always ask a prospective client, why do you want to document your processes and procedures? I need to understand, because if there is no reason, it's not a good fit, because the project will not go. It will just stall, and it will be like a good thing to do for a few months, but then we're not continuing because other things happened and it's not important enough. So why and why now? I agree.
Yeah. Otherwise you get churn, right? So if they're not motivated, if this isn't as important to them as it needs to be, they're going to disengage, and it's going to be a bad experience for everyone involved. And we all want to avoid that.
Absolutely. Well, Camela, this has been you're such a wealth of information. We created this entire process about how to follow up, which is amazing. So if people want to get a hold of you, how can they do that?
Oh, well, I'm very busy on LinkedIn. That's probably the best place to do so. And then I also have a podcast, the Revenue Marketing Report, where we talk about building soft skills to advance your career.
Nice. Okay. So definitely our listeners and our viewers go to that, check out that podcast, and find Camela on LinkedIn. Well, Camela, again, thank you so much for being a guest on this podcast. I really enjoyed this interview.
It's been a pleasure, and thank you for the great conversation.
Thanks for listening to the System Simplified podcast. We'll see you again next time, and be sure to click subscribe to get future episodes.